And welcome back to Waaaghtaktiks. Today we're here to talk about top 8 ORK units, Pariah Nexus edition. Whoa! So boys, we're back with another top 8 list. And unlike all the other plain vanilla bean lists you're going to see out there talking about your favorite green skin, today we're going to mix it up. It's not going to be just independent units, but we're going to definitely include combination units, meaning the leaders will also be included in these, and maybe some other units that I think help support and bolster these combinations that we're going to go over today. Some you may heard of, some you may not, but we're here to kind of reinforce, give you some good ideas. If any of these units pique your interest and I didn't go into depth on enough, you can check them out in our playlist or in other videos we have recorded, and check out other videos where we show them in lists. So with that being said, before we move on, let's talk about today's sponsor, the Baron of Dice. The Baron of Dice allows us to do our paint competition. Thank you to them. Of course, check them out in the description, 5% off, because nobody likes taxes. And thank you to them, because without them, they would not be able to do our paint contest. And that helps us, the community, and everybody involved greatly. So please support us. Thank you to Baron of Dice. So today, boys, let's start off with something somewhat new, yet something traditional in the Trukk Mek combo. Now, everybody knows that the truck itself could be considered one of the top ORK units already, but that's boring. Don't feel like kind of repeating everything on that. So I wanted to put a little cherry on top of the truck, the Mek. The Mek is the cherry on top of the truck. Now, what do I mean by this? We've seen actually this in Index Hammer. So we have +1 to hit on a mobile firing deck platform. I think this is underutilized and underappreciated in ORK players. And if you're a new person and maybe you want to start shooting, you could really tap into this. So simply all it means is that your Mek will give your truck and the units that embarked with it +1 to hit. Mind you, the units embarked are not necessarily shooting themselves. The truck is shooting their guns. Therefore, if you have, let's say, flash Gitz, the flash Gitz now, give the truck a bunch of Daka guns that give them sustain 1. Therefore, the Mek giving the truck +1 to hit means it gets to use all those guns at +1 to hit at a 4 ballistic skill with sustain. Very valuable. So it's a mobile firing deck, right? You can run around and actually shoot people and do some good shots on people from range. Love it. They don't see it coming, and the Mek's still alive. Next, you get to, and lone op, right? So because he's within 12 inches of the truck. Next, you have SWAT teams. So everybody knows about the truck. Everybody understands the basic, I put 10 units in a truck. Maybe I have 11 guys. I put someone else in there. But SWAT teams, if you're a new player, what do I mean by that? Well, think of it like this. Any unit that you can fit as a 5-man, or maybe, for example, a Meganobz unit, which breaks down into a truck as 6 slots, but only 3 models, that could be considered a candidate for a SWAT team. So this could be 5 flash Gitz, 5 burners, 5 Warbosses and a Nobz, or 5 flash Gitz, 3 Nobz and 5 Nobz and a Warboss. Whatever it may be, whatever game size you're playing, trucks are there for your SWAT teams. Next, you have safe staging for mobile bunkers. This is all about staging up to get that wall off, right? Everybody knows the trucks are simply for setting up. They have a small profile compared to maybe a big 10-man unit of flash Gitz, for example, right? Maybe a 10-man unit of Boyz, of Nobz example, and Warboss. A truck is way easier to hide and stage around terrain. Disembark, get those extra 3 inches, run up, charge. Very straightforward, very direct. Detachment flexibility. You can bring the Mek and the truck to Warhorde. That way you can have some mobile platform for shooting your flash Gitz and clearing some screens. You can use them for scoring. You can use them for, everybody knows about Dread Mob nowadays, use them for Dread Mobs. So the Mek and truck combo are versatile. If you don't want to give it to the truck, you could turn around and give +1 to a walker. It's fine, but the truck is very versatile and very loved in an ORK top list. And then last but not least, board presence. The fact that you have a lone op Mek, the fact that you have a bunch of little trucks running around means you're going to get utility, scoring capability, and stopping all these uppy downy shenanigans, and have plenty of units for scoring. But that, nevertheless, needs to move on to the next unit, a Warboss and Nobz. So everybody knows about the Warboss and Nobz. I call this the best SWAT team in our codex. So we just went over SWAT teams. This is the best of the SWAT teams. Typically, when you're looking at it, you're going to bring a 5-man unit of Nobz nowadays with a Warboss. We all know about Power Claws being our most valuable unit for AP, damage 2, things like that. They are our favorite skirmish trading pieces. So whenever you're bringing these guys, know that you're bringing power claws. Know that when you think about a skirmish unit or a trading piece, what does this mean? It means it's a unit that you're not necessarily tied to. You're willing for it to die, and you're willing it to go out there and pull points from the enemy as well when you go out there and get in combat, right? So you need something that's relatively anywhere from 170 exactly or less points to get this, trade setup kind of going. Now, can you go higher? Yes. So the Nobz are our best mix of volume, strength, and AP. So there are other units that have good AP, good strength, but they don't have the volume. There's other units that have good volume, but they don't have the AP and strength. So even though Nobz still lack in the strength department that we really need as an Orc Codex, for anybody new and wondering, hey, where do Nobz lie? They lie in the fact that they're all-rounder, good into a bunch of different units. Plus, depending on the detachment they're on, they can excel into even tougher units, or if something like Gaz need them for lethal, depending on what strats you're using. Maybe you want to do bully boys and you want to run into people and do mortal wounds. Maybe you want to re-roll hits with bully boys. Maybe you want faster than use from evil sons, whatever it may be. Nobz with a Warboss are detachment versatility. So they can be played in just about, besides maybe to hunt, every single Orc detachment. You can find a reason to fit Warboss and Nobz in every single Orc detachment, and I do advise them for that reason. Last but not least, the 10-man scalpel unit. If you're in a meta where a lot of power armor exists and you really just need to one-shot enemy units, the 10-man scalpel unit is there for you to just cut out that enemy problematic unit. Mind you, the 10-man unit plus the Warboss is excellent CP investment, whether you're in Warhorde, fighting on death, unbridled carnage, like we said, re-rolling hit rolls, whatever it may be, mortal wounds on the charge for impact charge, whatever it may be, a 10-man unit gives you the most CP versatility and best investment of that. So those are two obvious ones, but we have more to say. So let's move on to next. Our DACA boys, the S.A.G and Flash Gitz. So you could argue that I could have put these in their own two independent slides, but that's boring. And you guys, we need to move on and get more units involved. Let's talk about the differences and the similarities on why both of these guys are good options for our DACA. So these guys are cheap DACA, good for clearing for screens, right? Now, when you're looking at the Lootas and the shock attack gun, not necessarily always going to go into screens, but a flash gate unit, whether it's a 5-man or even a 10-man, can go on to clear screens, clear other chaff and skirmish units. The Luta unit, whether it's a single shock attack gun and a 5-man Luta or a 10, really determines on what it's going into. But we'll talk about that more. Next, we have very potent Overwatch potential. Orcs almost never get to appreciate Overwatch, right? And so here we are with two different units that have moderately respectable Overwatch, but one more so than others, meaning the Lootas and the shock attack gun are extremely potent Overwatch units when an enemy is on an objective. So keep in mind, when an enemy is on an objective, it cannot, for example, use Armor of Contempt. So if you're going into units that are problematic, that have good armor saves and have AOC, Lootas using Overwatch when that unit's on an objective circumnavigates the Armor of Contempt access and any other defensive capability strats that they want to use that are typically for the shooting phase. Not only that, but it also stops enemies in their tracks, letting them know, hey, when you move on that from that objective, I'm going to Overwatch you when you try to come counter punch me or counter shoot me or set up in that firing lane. I'm going to mess you up with this 175-point unit. And it messes up all of players' movement, enemies' unit. People don't typically have to deal with Orcs Overwatch. You gain a different level of respect from people with that. Now, can Flash Gitz do Overwatch? Yes. Not very, not very reliable, not very advised, but there's sometimes we're just pulling that straight up Overwatch, knowing you have sustained. Maybe you pop lethal in a desperate attempt to really hurt this unit becomes very valuable. So even having that options feels really good. Next is anti-vehicle and anti-infantry damage output. Now, can the Lootas do full rerolls to hit, big shells for bigger Gitch in Dread Mob detachment, use sustained hits, get full rerolls access, and then completely delete an enemy vehicle? Absolutely. And check out our videos about that. But the fact that Lootas are sitting at strength 8 natively -1/2 damage, they have access in Dread Mob to have access to an enhancement from the S.A.G for ignoring cover, meaning your Lootas with the S.A.G have the perfect profile to pick up For example, Marine bodies. You start picking up groups and handfuls of enemy Marines that are standing on objectives or trying to charge you, and you decide to overwatch. Next, you also have the damage potential of vehicles from the combination I just declared from the Lootas. But the Flash Gitz can also do that as well. Remember, Flash Gitz meet that threshold of strength 6 on their DACA profiles, meaning if you're going into armies of T3 units, whether it's Gene Stealers, Cultist Mobs, Astra Militarum, even other orcs because they're strength 6, for example, but all those units that are T3, you're wounding them on 2s, meaning any hit that lands and then ends up getting sustained is almost an assured wound. So here you go on screening potential, and they're 2 damage. That way, if for some reason it has, let's say, a feel no pain like an Astra Militarum Guardsman does, you get past that feel no pain as well. Not to mention the lethal capability that, let's say you're going into a Necron vehicle that typically only sits between, T10, T8, or T7, I believe, right? Necron vehicles sit somewhere between there. Eldar vehicles as well. Popping lethal on top of your sustain means that you can chip up into enemy vehicles in ways that they don't expect. So here you have the chipping potential of hurting enemy vehicles, or chipping potential from really devastating enemy infantry that anything short from, let's say, a Terminator in cover or Custodian in cover, right? So Flash Gitz are good for that. Lootas can also be good for that. Just know what profiles they go into. The real value is their odd strength potential and their flat damage too. So you're really good at just hurting a bunch of different things and chipping them. That's why they're anti-infantry, anti-vehicle, because they have versatility in both of those. Also, Flash Gitz are an extremely good combined arms value unit. A lot of the time, people think of them being in trucks. That's fine. Putting them in Morks, Gorks, allowing them to actually move up the field inside of a Gorkanaut. Gorkanaut gets blown up, and then the Boyz drop out, and the Flash Gitz, for example, the Flash Gitz drop out and allow themselves to shoot, then walk into combat and charge is fantastic when you can pull that off. Pulling a 5-man unit of Flash Gitz from reserves, allowing them to shoot, and then on your following turn, run up the field and start getting into a charge feels really good. So understanding that the Flash Gitz have good strength of 5 because they're innately Nobz, and then go up to strength 6 on the wall is fantastic. Should not be ever underappreciated or valued. Both units can be run in 5-man or 10-man units. If you're running a 10-man Lootas, I suggest Dread Mob, ignoring cover, enhancement, bam. If you're running, anything else, not with the enhancement to ignore cover, a 5-man unit with 1 SAG is simply good enough, because the shock attack gun is usually the real value in that unit, because he gets reroll hits. He has amazing AP. He has amazing damage. So he getting rerolls from the Lootas becomes the real value. So that's where you would bring 5 Lootas. And then if you want Flash Gitz, they can go in 10-man bricks. They can go in a couple 5-man Gitz, so they can really value the SWAT team potential. And then, of course, these guys are firing Dex lovers from the Mek, like we spoke about in the first slide. So what we spoke about here can simply go to your truck and use the Mek to make them able to do some of these things, not all these things, while they're inside of a vehicle. Next, we move on to the kill rig / Battlewagon. So, of course, again, hey, Eddie, why'd you do this? Why did you put battle wagons and kill rigs on the same slide? That's because I want to cover more things than not, and I feel like it's the value for you orc players and makes things more spicy for us to talk about. So we have, let's start off with some kill rig perspective here. Kill rig is the ultimate multi-phase orc unit. So a lot of the time people think that kill rigs and battle wagons are exactly the same. I promise you they are not, nor should they be used the same. They should not be deployed in the same places on the battlefield. If you are using your kill rigs and your battle wagons interchangeably, you are going to run into problems. That's why I decided to put them both on the same slide, because though they have similar giant profiles for how big they are and similar toughness durability profiles, they're drastically different. So that being said, I started off with pointing out that the kill rig is a multi-phase orc unit. Kill rig is a support unit mostly, right? He's mostly should be seen as a support unit. He is good for giving +1 strength, lethal capabilities. He is good for possibly charging units and doing some decent combat, getting OC places, doing Overwatch with his War Tower to chip enemy elite infantry or hurt enemy transports like rhinos. And for the most part, kill rigs are meant to be played more in a defensive manner. That's why I call them multi-phase yet a support role. They transport, they move, they shoot, they charge, they fight. and they support with an actual datasheet ability. That's why they're multi-phase. Next is respectable support Daka. So, of course, you could take the mech and actually use firing deck potential and making a Daka transport in the Battlewagon itself. That's totally an option too. But in itself, the Battlewagon does have a good amount of small arms fire. It does have firing deck. Typically, you go hard case, but some people like to use it the other way. And like we spoke about with the kill rig, it does have its word tower, and it does have a lava, which is kind of cute. Next, you have cheap T10 transport chassis. So a lot of the time, like we said, the Battlewagon would be hard case up to T12, but both of these guys are relatively cheap as dirt. 160 points for a wagon, 155 for a real kill rig. This is straight stat check central. You're just running up on people saying, hey, I'm T10, 16 wounds, 6 up, feel no pain on the rig. I am T12, -1 for armor of contempt to your actual AP. So reducing your AP by 1. Excuse me, I said that. Reducing AP by 1 from the Battlewagon from armor of contempt. And I have 16 wounds and covers everywhere in the game. So a lot of the time people have to invest all of their anti-vehicle profiles into each one of these units on their turn. Unless you put them like right in the middle and everybody in the whole army can shoot at them, whatever. But a lot of the time they're going to, really have to focus down these units with multiple activations. And a lot of the time you're not going to be able to kill them all. That's why they're brought in variables of 1, 2s, or 3s. Now, if you bring them as a 1, a lot of the time it's playing defensive and you have 1 brick of whatever it is inside of it. But a lot of the time people are bringing 2s and 3s. So they can bring 2 kill rigs and 1 battle wagon, or they can bring triple kill rigs. They can bring 2 kill rigs and 0 battle wagons. All of these varieties are totally accessible, totally acceptable, and applicable in multiple different detachments. So if you have 1 but not the other, or 2 in the other, you can mix these guys up. Just because you're running the rig doesn't mean you can't run wagons. Just keep in mind their positioning in the tables is drastically different, because the kill rig is more of a support role, while the wagon is more of a staging, throw them in your face and stat check people role. Multi-detachment utility. So the kill rig can be brought in a green tide list to support your boys, so that your orc boys can actually get higher strength thresholds. They can shoot enemy transports that, like I said, get in the way. They can even act as a bulwark and go into the middle of the objective early, the middle of the table early for your green tide list, soak up an enemy counter charge, and then let your green tide boys move forward. So they access there. They can work in a Warhorde list for valuable reasons, because that's where most Snagga units lie in Warhorde. So kill rigs go good in Warhorde. They go good in the Hunt, and they're somewhat acceptable in Bully Boys, but not where I advise them. But that's 3 detachments you could run kill rigs. Battle wagons can be run in Cult of Speed, because you can use faster than use enhancements, so that you can throw a 10-man unit of Nobz or boys up the field. You can use 1 to 2 wagons in Bully Boys to stage up mobs of boys, or to take advantage of double WAAAGH. You can take 1 wagon and multiple kill rigs for Warhorde. So all of these guys are useful in multiple different detachments. Definitely advise that you to look at them and respect them for what they can do, and understand that they're each different in those respects. You do have respectable melee from the rigs and the battle wagons. They do give all right tank shock, and they do have good amount of OC, so that at least you can draw some sort of investments from the enemy. Let's say you just put the transport, tag an objective, force the enemy to come out and pop your rig. Your boys get out, your boys get to fight. Vice versa also works for the wagon. And then the durability from these units, Transport 22 is amazing. So what are we going to do with this Transport 22? Well, let us move on to the Snaggas and the boys. So the boys are now at 80 points, and the Snaggas are now at 95 points. Guys, I freaking love that. I hated when Snagga boys were 105 points. And I felt like orc boys were always just a tad bit too many points. So now they're at a very, very appropriate point cost. That's why we actually see more ways that they've been run. So let's talk about the variety of ways they're now been run. So just keep in mind that mass T5 bodies, 5-up invulns with 2 OCs impacts primary in every single game. So whether you're running these guys in bricks of 20, whether you're running these guys in mass MSU of 10-man units, the fact that you have a bunch of T5 bodies that have access to a 5-up invuln, even sometimes some sort of feel no pain, and 2 OC means you're stealing objectives, swinging primary in the game, and getting good trades, because both these guys are some of the best battle lines in all of 40K. Next is detachment versatility. Again, like you've seen in multiple of these units, they have detachment versatility. That's super important to me when we're looking at the viability of different units in 40K. If they're limited to one detachment, that's still good. If it could be spammed out in threes, but can it be brought in multiple different detachments and still play? That way, it's a good long-term investment for me in my collection. Boyz and a lot of these different units are. Now, 20-man unit of Boyz plus Warboss and blank, right? I put and blank because you can fill that with a pain boy, a weird boy, a big Mek. All three of those guys are totally viable options. The big Mek has now seen more play than ever. People take advantage of follow me lads, and then here we go combination from Warhorde, so he can just chuck his way up the field. We've seen people bring in bully boys, taking advantage of the double wall so that he can really stage up and never stop. He stops the fact that they get screened in bully boys, because bully boys is simply one phase kind of detachment for the most part. The big Mek helps offset that because he actually moves through people with his screening. People bring pain boys because of the green tide, obviously for the 5-up feel no pain, even though he's 80 points was outrageous. And then of course you could bring a weird boy. Now you could bring a solo weird boy because you could just throw forward 20-man units of Boyz or even a 10-man unit to try to do a secret mission. Or you can bring one with your 20-man unit and just set the pressure up right in people's faces. But what's also a bit surprising is 20-man unit of Snagga Boyz. So 20-man unit Snagga Boyz in wagons near Gaz is actually becoming more popular than ever. So this is a mid-table summer bully. It does replace your typical Boyz units, but you don't have multiple characters, so it's less assassination points and investment on that end. You get higher strength thresholds because Snagga Boyz get up to strength 6. And they get innate rerolls. So if you're trying to fish for some 6s to lethal, you can do that innately without having to really rely on unbridled carnage. And the Beast Boss himself allows for that compacting effect of killing enemy vehicles. Of course, the 20-man unit of Snaggas is really, really good for dealing with something like a Catan, Avatar of Cain, stuff like that. And then last but not least, you have 10-man units of Boyz that are simply brought inside of a truck. Good for running up the table, getting in fights, start getting those trades on early, touching objectives so that you could possibly sticky them. And then, of course, they have grenade access. Don't forget about that. And then 10-man units of Snagga Boyz plus a Beast Boss is our best anti-tank combo in all of 40K when he's in Warhorde. So don't ever forget about that because, you'll bring 3 times of those in Warhorde. As for outside of Warhorde, not too keen on a Beast Boss, Snagga Boyz, just because really getting sustains is the real ability to spike there and really brings out the anti-killing potential of that. But if you bring them another detachment, still works to get some, 6 average devastating wounds on them. Next, we move to a new sleeper, new contender to the top list, to our top 8 list is Kommando / Snikrot. So I had to bring both of these guys and put them both on this slide as well. One, because Snikrot is the leader to these guys, and because both of these guys have Infiltrator. Yet, just like when we were talking about the kill rigs and the battle wagons, these guys should not be used in the same exact way, even though they seem to serve similar roles, yet different. So first off, both these guys are only infiltrators. Therefore, board control is king. So in Pariah Nexus, board control is just pushing the pace on everybody. If you don't have some sort of scouting, if you don't have some sort of infiltrator, you're really going to have a hard time going undefeated. You're really going to have a hard time dealing with certain alpha striking armies, certain armies that have the ability to screen you and delay your pressure as an orc player. So Tau Empire has a lot of infiltration and scouting. Astromel Tarm, a lot of scouting that can hold you back. So these are armies that want to hold you at kind of arm's length, and they actually have the tools to do that if you don't have infiltrators. Even if you're bringing an army that's not necessarily trying to kill someone like a green tide, the commandos allow you to move up this table safely and use the commandos to kind of act as a screen so your boys don't just get directly charged by, let's say, a big unit of world eaters, right? They have to chew through your commandos first. Or if you're going into a shooting matchup, it allows people to kind of stage up and try to shoot away your commandos because they're scared of getting touched by them since they can't overwatch them. And them moving up to shoot or displace your commandos allow you to countercharge them with other units in your orc detachment. If you can't set up offense from your commandos, then they're simply good for board control and scoring, meaning you're denying enemy deep strikes and you're taking over board corners yourself, which allows you to keep going secondaries and denying the enemies the capability to do so. High ceiling, high reward. So if you're good, if you get good reps with them, if you take the time to figure out how to use these guys on different deployments and different missions and different matchups that fix your meta, you will get a high reward for this. Plenty of 4-0 or undefeated orc players use commandos, so I definitely think that they have a place and always have, but now more than ever, because they dropped in 100 to 120 points, and because in Pariah Nexus, infiltrators and scouts are more popular than ever. Detachment versatility again. I've seen people brought commandos in Cult of Speed because you can't let yourself get boxed up in your deployment zone with all your buggies, your transports, and your bikers. Therefore, bringing mandos so you don't get deployment jailed is super important and isn't limited to any orc detachment. No orc detachment wants to be jailed in their own deployment. Therefore, just in that alone, commandos have the accessibility. Now you have Snikrot. Snikrot is not to be attached to your commandos. Giving them cover is simply not worth it. That's because Snikrot's value is in his redeploy game. The fact that he is one of the best redeploys in all of 40k means he's one of the best scoring units in all of 40k. Low and up, stealth, so he can actually be safe when he's trying to score these secondaries. I advise that you leave him sometimes even in your own deployment zone and then pick him up later, turn 3, 4, 5, so you can score secondaries in your opponent's home deployment zone, because a lot of the time people are screening those now since, you know, we have uppy downy. So if they don't think or know that you still have deep strikes in reserve and they don't really consider Snikrot as a threat, they might give you a spot for him to drop in and start scoring. Or he can act as an early game if you need to create space and stop yourself from being scouted on and move blocked. He can kind of help you with that too, but he is only one model, so not really good for that all the time. Lone op is super underutilized by orcs. Understanding that you can simply walk out and touch an objective and force the enemies to get within 12 inches of this model means you just set up the enemy within 12 inches of getting countercharged. So try to take advantage of that, orc players. And then both are very good in orc list. I don't think you need both at the same time, but bringing them both at the same time does give you two different tools, yet staging potential in early games of Pariah Nexus 40k. And of course, the commandos leave room for Zodgrod and the Grots. So Grots in themselves are excellent units in 40k. So this is not exclusive that you need Zod and Grots as the best unit in 40k. Grots on their own are one of the best units in 40k. But we're going to focus on Zodgrod Wortsnagga. So you can check these videos we have out on this, but we'll do it real quick. One is he is our only scouting unit in all of in all of our codex, and it's Scout 9. So he can really get shuffling downfield. Of course, if you put him and a 10-man unit of Grots into a transport, the dedicated transport, which is only our truck, can adopt the scouting keyword. Therefore, the truck can scout forward, and allowing kind of a leapfrog capability where your truck moves scouts, Zog disembarks, and then some boys move up, and then they embark into the truck. So it's kind of fun in that. And also scouting just allows you to take up early game behind the commandos and pressure opponents. Next, you have battle line potential. So, of course, these guys in Dreadmob do get battle line, but I think something that people forget a lot of the time is because they're a battle line, they have access to getting the secondary mission rules for free. So they can accidentally go to ground for free. They can get stalwart for free. So if they're led by Zod in a 22-man unit or just running around in 22-man bricks, they can take advantage of these secondary rules to your missions. Next is stratagem utility. So in Dreadmob and Warhorde, Zodgrod's super runs are extremely valuable. Now, are Grots on their own good for CP? No. But in super runs in Dreadmob have a 12-inch reactive move during the WAAAGH, which is amazing for stealing home field objective, screening big killy enemy monsters or vehicles, gunking up the enemy gun line, whatever it may be. Another high ceiling, high reward type of unit, and excess of stratagems for Zodgrod and his super runs in either Dreadmob or in Warhorde, because Warhorde can also use Here We Go or even Unbridled Carnage, where we spoke about with kill rigs, could be given these guys, or like we said earlier with the commandos, +1 strength. So they end up doing unexpected damage that could really catch the enemy off guard. Then you have super runt capability. So if you're not familiar, +1 to hit, +1 to wound, and then also -1 to wound in themselves stacks really, really well during the wall for a 5-up invuln. And it stacks really, really well because Zod ends up moving 12 inches on the wall. This is one of the best units in all of 40k for swinging primary objectives in 1 turn and 1 activation during the wall, because he's really good at stealing enemy home fields objectives. And Grots having such tiny bases means they have a great time getting on objectives and really stealing and swinging that primary. Next, you have Grot CP farming, of course, can't replace it. 40 points for 10 Grots and 1 Nob. Why did I write Nob? Because if you really pay attention, a runt herder is essentially a Nob. He has 2 wounds, a 5-up armor save. Therefore, take advantage of the fact that he has 2 wounds, and you can take saving throws on him. Check out our videos for that. For 40 points, you get Grots and 2 additional wounds from the Nob, so that's 12 wounds for 40 points with 11 bodies that can do a variety of scoring, right? If you stage them to do secondaries or to stand in certain parts of the table, they can score. You could put them reserves. They can screen not only deep strikes, but they can screen charging units in melee. So understanding when to put other Grots forward is this really, really important skill that you must adopt as an Orc player, not just simply putting them in your backline every single game. Knowing when to reserve them and taking advantage of their mass OC is huge. And then last but not least, I suggest you own 3 units of Grot. So let's say 30 Grots and then 3 runt herders. That's because either you're going to put some with Zod, or you're going to just put 1 unit on your home field objective with Zod, or you're going to put 3 minimum sized units in your Bully Boys or your Warhorde, whatever it may be. Long-term investment in your collection. Just a tip of advice. That's how much I value Grots. And last but certainly not least in this top 8 list, because this list is not in any particular order, these are all excellent units, is Ghazghkull, Thraka, Makari, and 2 Meganobz. So Makari is the real value. So the 12-inch lethal aura is actually what really, really throws Gaz over the top. A lot of the time, really exceptional players understand that you would rather have Gaz take saves than Makari when it's not go time, because you really, really need that wall turn. Matters less than his 2-up invuln. Now, can the 2-up invuln really, really swing stuff? Absolutely. But having a 12-inch lethal aura is game changing for Orcs, and we have nothing else like it. Next, you have Gaz himself solves a lot of Orc problems. So the fact when he's leading a unit, he's +1 to hit, +1 to wound, and he's straight up flat 4 damage for his strike. And then he also has a magnificent sweep attack that's strength 8 -2 2 damage with +1 to wound built into that. He has also critical 5+ built into his profile now. Therefore, he can get lethals on 5+s. Even from everything that he's punching, including his sweeps, which is magnificent. If you really are worried about like a 4-up invuln really getting in your way. He is infantry, so he can move through terrain, which always catches the enemy off guard if you don't continuously remind them. People wish they had that like Guilliman, so Guilliman, cry the tears that you may, but Gaz with his giant T6 body is highly maneuverable. In Warhorde, he goes crazy. There's a large list to as why Gaz goes crazy in Warhorde. And honestly, this is his utmost premier detachment. Gaz is S tier in Warhorde, and he's arguable for every other detachments. But as for Warhorde, the fact that he can really take advantage of his infantry keyword, use Here We Go on the wall turn so he can really run up the field and really tap into Unbridled Carnage. It gives a different kind of spike in damage that no other Orc detachment has access to in melee. That really ends up being the anchor to why a lot of Orc players love Warhorde, not just because of its stratagems. Not to mention that Gaz is viable in every other detachment. So a lot of the time, people just have a hard time as Orc players with dealing with a really durable enemy unit straight up walking into the middle of the table. Gaz really deters that and allows you as an intermediate or newer Orc player to threaten away those kind of problematic units and actually have a tool to deal with them. So even if you're playing Cult of Speed, Gaz can end up staging in the middle deployment, the middle terrain table, and set up to charge into the middle of the table and deal with those problematic units. He can end up playing the Hunt, so he can take advantage of critical 5+s in the Hunt. He can end up playing Warhorde because it's his favorite detachment. He can run Bully Boys since he gets 2 auras of lethals for Bully Boys. He can even run Dread Mob because for the same reason as Cult of Speed, where he can stage up in the middle terrain piece and then run out while everybody else fights on the flanks of the table. So Gaz is magnificent. A lot of the time you are only paying for 2 Meganobz because the 4-up Feel No Pain doesn't exist anymore, and the Meganobz aren't really that potent and killy. The bigger the unit gets, the bigger the profile gets for shooting him. That being said, I could may understand an argument to use a 3-man unit just because you don't want the 3 bodyguards to die too quickly and then Makari get grenaded or precisioned or whatever. Not precisioned, I guess. He would get precisioned anyway, but he would get killed on his own exclusively. The bodyguards don't exist. So I can see you bringing 3, but a lot of the time I only advise 2. So with that being said, let's mention some honorable mentions before you guys forget, and then we end this stuff. So we have Warboss in Mega Armor with the Teleporter. So in Bully Boys detachment, I almost always expect you to bring this QRF, Quick Response Force. I love having a Deep Strike unit that is a real significant rapid ingress threat. Next is the Death Killer Wartrike with the 4-up Feel No Pain from Warhorde. I do like this unit being brought with bikers. Simply 3 bikers because it allows him to take on a variety of high damage weapons instead. The bladed wounds are fantastic because a biker Nob gets 4 wounds, so any 3 damage weapons that come in can be split onto him. They have good armor saves, and they take advantage of Artist Nails while you're in the detachment. But if you really don't want such a big profile and you want to use those points for something else, even an independent Death Killer Wartrike works very well. Third is a Big Mek in Mega Armor, whether it's Smoky Gubbins or Smoky Gubbins from Dreadmob or Cunning But Brutal. I think these are totally fine. Maybe in smaller games, it's a little bit more proficient. Smoky Gubbins makes this extremely hard to shift and shooting. So if you're playing like 1,000 points or 1,500 points where people can't really go and get an easy charge off on these guys and they have to try to shoot them, they'll be almost impossible to shoot in Smoky Gubbins and in Dreadmob. But if you're bringing them in your Warhorde detachment, Cunning But Brutal allows this unit to fall back since it's not really good at fighting necessarily. It's going to be stuck in combat a lot of the time. It allows you to keep positioning this unit around the battlefield and regenning models, so it feels really good. And then, of course, Storm Boys are fantastic for scoring, all game advance and charging. Burner Boys are another unit that could have been included in the slide for Great WAAAGH because they can do similar things to Flash Gitz and Lootas. They simply don't do them as well. And the datasheet ability of re-rolling wounds is really nice, but you have to be within 6. So it's a little niche to really get off. Do suggest bringing them if you have points. Put them in reserves. Feels nice. Or as a SWAT team. Def-Coptas, you could argue bikers could go here too, but Def-Coptas actually have Deep Strike. Doesn't mean you should always Deep Strike, but the fact that only other Storm Boys have Deep Strike is cool. Having a handful of rockets in your pockets with Twin Ring feels nice. They do have a little bit of mortal wound potential. They are more durable than, let's say, a biker unit, so that could feel nice for scoring secondary objectives. The difference is that they are vehicles, so they do give that away, and because they're vehicles, they can't go through buildings, which is where Storm Boys also take advantage of. Storm Boys have their advantage as well. So they are a bit different. Def-Copters aren't as mobile as the Storm Boys, but still great for surviving and being up on the table. So with that being said, those are my top 8 orc unit combos because, you know, it's not necessarily just a simple unit anymore, right? It's the unit plus the character equals said unit. So this is my top 8 orc unit combos in Pariah Nexus. If there's a unit you think I forgot, didn't go into enough and you want to see more, check out the playlist. Leave a comment if you want to disagree or bring up a unit that you think should have belonged on this list. And let's give a shout out to Alan Yu for a 7th month. Whoa! Comments. Let's see. We got want to play without 101. I want to play without 120 boys. Hard to make a list. Don't know exactly what you mean by that, but let me know what you mean by that in the Discord, because I love playing with my orc boys and Green Tide. So thank you to everybody who's here. Of course, there's always one thing to keep in mind is don't cross a wall because we knock your teeth out.